Okay. He was shot from a distance, and it took some time, but eventually someone was accused and faced the law and was convicted of killing Martin Luther King.
They found the prints of the James Earl Ray.
James Earl, that's very correct, sir.
I read a book.
All right, and it was at what motel? Starts with an L. Very good. Laura. The Lorraine Motel.
Oh, yeah.
And in what city?
And
It was in Tennessee. Close. Starts with M. Memphis, Tennessee. The Lorraine Motel. Malcolm X, as you said, was also assassinated in what city? It's a big city.
New York.
And he was assassinated at an auditorium known as the Audubon Auditorium.
yeah, and Malcolm X also went to Egypt to study the religion and see, and he stayed there for 3 weeks.
Okay.
And when he came back, he learned that it was peace, and he needed to be peace like them. There needed to be peace like the Egyptians. So he was in the auditorium, and he knew he was gonna die. He knew it, but he didn't think he was gonna die that bad. And he knew people were trying to kill him. And they and so when he was speaking, they pulled out the guns on him.
All right, and that was in New York at the Audubon Theater. So what you're saying is Malcolm X took a trip to an area in the Middle East known as Mecca. Mecca is the Holy Land for Muslims, which is not that far from the Holy Land for Christians.
Was it
Bethlehem.
Didn't Martin Luther King get threats of him being killed?
Yes. Both Martin Luther King and Malcolm X received threats at different times. And Dakivius, if you're playing games, you need to pay attention.
I'm not playing games.
Okay, just making sure you're paying attention, sir. Both of them did receive death threats. And in fact, their homes respectively were bombed at different times of their lives.
You said bomb?
Bombed. Back in the 1960s, one of the things they did to a lot of black churches, different black leaders, they would not only call, when I say they, those people who didn't want to see black people having the same rights as the majority of Americans or any other place where you may have found black people that didn't have the same rights, like in Africa, like in some parts of England, and of course here in the United States. They would make threats of violence, and in particular, bombing someone's home. And they did that both Martin Luther King and Malcolm X.
And then while they were out, they detonated.
They did.
Then they killed Martin Luther King's wife, and
They did. What you're thinking of is a situation in Birmingham, Alabama, which was a hotbed of segregation and a lot of racial violence. Martin Luther King marched in Birmingham. And Birmingham, in fact, was known as Bombingham because there were so many bombs that went off, in particular against black churches. And one of the churches was known as the 16th Street Baptist Church. And Spike Lee, what school did Spike Lee go to? What college might Spike Lee attend? Same one Martin Luther King went to.
Memphis. I mean, no.
Morehouse.
Morehouse College. Spike Lee made a film, a documentary, and I went to a college in Alabama where I met one of the young ladies' fathers who had been killed in this church, the 16th Street Baptist Church. He was on the board of trustees for the school I went to, Alabama A&M. Spike Lee made a film known as The Four Little Girls. And if you remember from what we saw in Greensboro doing the walkthrough of civil rights history, there was 4 little girls that were killed through a bomb in a church in Birmingham. And that happened a lot back then. So not only were people being threatened,
They're actually dead.
Luther King pointed out that violence is a way of achieving racial justice. It's both impractical and immoral. It is impractical because it is a descending spiral ending in destruction for all. The old law of an eye for an eye leaves everybody blind. It's immoral because it seeks to humiliate the opponent rather than lend his understanding. It seeks to annihilate rather than to convert. Violence is immoral because it thrives on hatred rather than love. It destroys community and makes brotherhood impossible. It leaves society in monologue, which means to have a conversation by yourself, rather than dialogue, what we're doing here. Violence ends by defeating itself. It creates bitterness in the survivors and brutalities in the destroyers. That was a principle that Martin Luther King believed in terms of his philosophy of nonviolence. Malcolm X, on the other hand, said, I think there are plenty of good people in America, but there are also plenty of bad people in America. And the bad ones are the ones who seem to have all the power and be in these positions to block things that you and I need. Because this is the situation, you and I have to preserve the right to do what is necessary to bring an end to that situation. And it doesn't mean that I advocate violence, but at the same time, I am not against using violence in self-defense. I don't even call it violence when it is self-defense. I call it intelligence. Very different principle.
It was, I forgot, was it peace and prosperity?
Peace and prosperity could be a concept that you could say both men believed in. Malcolm X, as long as you don't bother me, I won't bother you. Martin Luther King said, even if you do something to me, I'll still love you, my brother, and I won't do anything to you. During the time period in which both these men were struggling to gain equal rights, you also had people, very famous people, who knew they had the opportunity for platforms that people would see. Jim Brown was a very famous athlete. Some say the greatest running back in the history of the NFL. Jim Brown stood up and spoke out against racial segregation. And at the time when Jim Brown was at the top of his game, because he didn't like how he was being treated by his coach, a white owner, Jim Brown said, I'll show you. I'll go do something else. I'll become an actor, and I don't need to do this thing with football anymore. I'm not owned by anyone. I have just as much rights as you, man to man. And he never played football ever again.
Some people are still racial. Some people go to each other.
Yeah, like I know this kid at school yesterday. He actually said black people are always lying. Little boy in our school.
And then,
That's a racial stereotype that should be overcome by telling the truth always.
and then then it happened to me like last year.
Mm-hmm. You experienced some type of...
Yeah, I saw other people picking at black people saying, you stupid little black kid and stuff like that.
And when something like that happens, it's okay to say something in terms of trying to get them to stop messing with that person and to help that person get out of that situation. It doesn't mean that you have to react and get mad and want to fight, because even if it makes you mad, you may want to fight. There's a different way to handle it, especially if you're in school. And so that's why we come to today, and we've been talking the whole time about the notion of nonviolence. Okay? Very famous individuals. They were not a part of any organized group in terms of Black Panthers, Muslims, anything back during that time period. Well, these two gentlemen, one that won, obviously, medals during the Olympics, the 1960s, wore black gloves of solidarity to show we're black brothers. We stand up together. We want unity in this country. We're together.
So white people wear white gloves?
No, white women, they didn't wear white gloves. This was just a symbol of the fist back in the 60s. Brothers used to walk up to one another and say, what's going on? Black power, my man, right on, you dig it. Give me some fire, give me skin, brother, those kind of things. This was one of the main things they did back then.
They had them on the Afro pics too.
That's right.
The fist.
Mm-hmm. The fist.
I got one. They stick them on in the air.
And what's the symbol underneath the fist, on the pit?
Oh, the fist. I mean the back of
You
the
also,
peace, the peace.
exactly. Pride and peace.
Oh, I don't got to do
Okay, you got Superman then. Strong. See, it's symbols that were involved in it. Martin Luther King, obviously, gave the famous I Have a Dream speech in 1963.
And the Lincoln Memorial.
Very correct, sir. And as we mentioned before, it was at the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis on April 4th, 1968, that he was assassinated. Who's this man right there?
Malcolm. His attorney.
Who's this guy right there? Once
I
again.
can't see.
He's an afro and a mustache.
If I told you he's from Greenville, South Carolina,
Oh.
would you know who it is? He was a young man that came up during that time period, and he went to a school that we went to visit in that area in Greensboro. This young man went to North Carolina A&T. His son right now is a congressman from Illinois.
That's your dad?
I don't even know.
The Reverend Jesse Jackson. Senior.
Oh, yeah, the one that we saw in
He learned a lot of his principles from Martin Luther King. Where's this?
his grade section.
Have y'all been there?
Yes.
One of the biggest things that we, as a nation, had the great honor to happen for us is the ability for this country to stand up and recognize one of his own sons. And in fact, Martin Luther King, being the only black person that had a national holiday, signed back in the 1980s by President Ronald Reagan, recognizing this and signing this into law. Martin Luther King, of course, was an accomplished person. He had a number of things that he was known for, who's who. He won top awards from the NAACP. Time magazine recognized him as one of the most outstanding personalities. Even in New York, he was recognized by the police in terms of the work he was doing. He was also, at one point, recognized as one of the 16 world leaders who had contributed the most to the advancement of freedom during a given time period. That was back in the 50s.
And plus he.
Time magazine named him Man of the Year. And of course, he spoke up for the rights of workers throughout this country. And you hear a lot of people in the news say unions. Martin Luther King met with people from unions on a regular basis and worked with them. And one of the places we passed by on Auburn Avenue when we first came in was the SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Martin Luther King was a leader within that organization and was recognized on a number of occasions. Of course, by the efforts of Martin Luther King, he wasn't working just for black people trying to make your situation better. He was working for everyone to make this world a better place. And that's what he gave his life for. So, our question for you today, understanding what you've seen from the life of Martin Luther King is, and you don't have to say this out loud, but I want you to think about it, and I want you to think about it every single day, embracing the life of Martin Luther King. How will you improve the world? Dr. King helped make America a fair place. What will your contribution be to make this a better place? You're very funny. Think about it. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The various websites you can always Google and pull up to find out about the life of Martin Luther King. If you ever want to talk to me about his papers, I have all his actual papers that he wrote in a set of books. Of course, you can go online. There's even going to be a mention of this group being connected with the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change. That's the end of the speech.
So, Mr. Brown.
Yes, sir.
Did he say anything about his Nobel Peace Prize?
It did. He did. At the very end.
Mr. Brown,
Yes, sir.
earlier when you thought I was playing games, I was actually putting up this website on Martin Luther King versus Malcolm X. It's a big old long essay.
Yeah, what's that on which
It's
side?
a
Freeessay.com.
The Martin Luther King Center for Nonviolent